Welcome to Academia Unlocked, a special series from Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy, where we take one classic work and explore it through a 4-part literary journey, moving from understanding the text to a deep analysis, to culture interpretation, and finally to collective reader meaning. This is Jack.
And I'm Amy, longtime friends, readers, and co-hosts, and between the two of us, we have over 13 years of academic literary training, including bachelor's in creative writing. Our goal with this series is to bring academic-level literary discussion into a space that feels accessible, thoughtful, and genuinely curious, without losing the depth that makes these works so enduring.
Academia Unlocked isn't just talking about a book. It's about learning how to read, interpret, and question it in new ways. Think of this series as stepping into a guided seminar where we explore not only what the story says, but how and why it continues to resonate across time. Each book is broken into 4 episodes, each building on the last. And today, we are on the final episode of Wuthering Heights, where we talk to you guys, the listeners. Although I bet this felt pretty random.
Oh,
we
yeah.
posted it on our stories where it's like, hey guys, you know how we only talk about romantasy books?
Yeah, talk to us about Wuthering Heights now.
Yeah, like what are your thoughts? No one questioned it, which I respect. Like,
I
thanks,
respect
guys.
it. I respect it.
Yeah, no one was like, the fuck are you doing? No one even asked, are you doing an episode on it? They just answered.
I love the trust.
It's so true. So I guess this one is a little bit more relaxed in the sense that we're still figuring it out. Like this is our first time doing this round or this version of everything. We'll be better for Pride and Prejudice, in theory. Yeah.
Your confidence makes us such experts in this field.
You know, it's funny because it says that we have creative writing bachelors, and I want to be like, and master's degrees, okay? Like,
yes.
I need to add that to it, where it's and we have master's degrees.
We're still fine-tuning, like, the intro, the outro, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, but if you're listening, you've, like, hung out, so thank you.
Thank you. So what we're doing today is we're moving from analysis into collective, collaborative meaning-making, where you're contributing to the interpretation of this novel or the movie or miniseries if you commented on those.
The structure we're going is interpretation, synthesis, reader response criticism, that's where we polled you guys, and then just larger reflections that Amy and I will just kind of wrap up our thoughts on Wuthering Heights, never to be discussed again.
Before we dive in, let's start with this overarching question. After exploring the text of the book, theory, and the adaptations, what happens when we look at how readers themselves interpret Wuthering Heights?
Basically, I mean, your thoughts are also important, is what we're saying. You know what I mean? It is unfortunate because none of you have heard the other episodes, so you don't know what we're asking.
Yeah,
we're not,
true.
Like, the hell if you know what we're doing of, like, academic, and that's going to continue for every book.
You're just going to have to trust us.
You're just going to have to, like, figure out the system and then try to be on Instagram to be ahead of things.
If you're new to the show, this is something we do even in our other series when we're talking about romantasy, which is we ask for our listeners and fellow readers to tell us their interpretation of the text. And oftentimes this does impact Jack's interpretation and my interpretation of the text. We are often amazed at what listeners have to contribute, and they've definitely changed our minds on characters and ways to interpret situations.
Oh, we've been humbled.
Lots.
Humbled.
We would not be doing this if we didn't know we would be humbled along the way.
You're saying that we wouldn't have done this?
Let me rephrase. If we were more proud human beings,
yeah, there it is.
I don't think we would be able to do this because we understand we're wrong often.
Do you remember the one listener who sent us a note that was like, you guys are doing great. Now here are the following things that you can do better. And this is why you guys got to see in this.
Yeah, it resonated so much
with us. It did.
And
in that note, kind of were like, shit, I need to like reorientate myself into it. That person influenced our Silver Flames analysis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they never wrote back.
Well, they haven't heard the new season yet.
No, but we definitely talked about their comment on the podcast.
That's true.
So we're going to start segment 1, and that is going to be readers as interpreters. So that's you guys. The goal here is really take your comments from just comments and submissions and bring it into analysis. right? In literature studies, meaning doesn't exist just in text. It emerges from readers interacting with it. Books are only as meaningful as the people who read them decide to make them be. And today we're looking at how different readers interpret the same emotional landscape of Wuthering Heights. Okay, so we're going to start off with, is Heathcliff romantic or monstrous? And because we didn't give listeners a better constructive way of feedback, no one's answering them in the way that we need them to because we didn't ask it correctly. But I will say, not a single one of the comments that we received has anything to do with Heathcliff being romantic and / or monstrous.
Yeah.
I mean, on one half, good job, ladies, not calling him romantic. On the other half, why are we also letting another male character get through the weeds? Because there are some comments about Kathy, and it's like, yeah, but, you know, Heathcliff is like the monster.
But, you know, it is refreshing that our respondents haven't been like drooling over the MMC, right? Because that's typically what we see with romantasy books. Kudos to all of you who aren't in love with Heathcliff because he is not necessarily a lovable character.
Yeah.
But to Jack's point, why aren't we giving Heathcliff more shit for his morally grayness?
I mean, it goes into the fact that almost every variation that we've seen, although there are an infinite amount that Amy and I have not watched every single one, but in many of the variations, he is romanticized. He is in love with Kathy. He is the one who is fighting for our girl there, and it's not, the narrative isn't necessarily abusive, manipulative figure. I think that when it was announced of Jacob Elordi and this romantic movie coming out, there was a lot of conversation about Heathcliff being a man of color, and like that Jacob Elordi very much obviously isn't. So there was a lot of conversation around that, which is great. Now, there were some people who were saying like, hey guys, this was an abusive, manipulative relationship. And then there were so many comments and videos of people saying, I don't want these literary girlies coming in and ruining this for me.
Ooh.
I know.
Oh man, that's rough. I don't think it helps that some of the press around this was also very much focusing on the desirability of Jacob Elordi. Like, I remember seeing a post about Margot Robbie previewing the movie to her girlfriends for somebody's bachelorette party and how they were all feral over Jacob Elordi. And if that's the press you're putting out before the movie even comes out, I think you've missed the point about what Heathcliff is supposed to represent, because the toxicity of his obsession ends up being glorified.
Yeah, and it's like, it's just part of the problem. Like, it's perpetuating. And you and I both loved the movie. Big fans of it. I thought it was like, I cried at the end, sobbed.
I did too.
It's just not Wuthering Heights. Like, you cannot call it Wuthering Heights. It's an AU fanfic is what I've decided that is.
Yep.
But the amount of people who have not read Wuthering Heights, who might have only seen various adaptations of it, they're the ones who are going to walk away having an impression on it, and then what people and producers and studios put out is people's impression of Wuthering Heights rather than Wuthering Heights itself.
Yep, totally true. And it doesn't help that at least every iteration of Wuthering Heights adaptations that we've seen always absolve Heathcliff of his morality or lack of morality, and always paint this as quote unquote the greatest love story ever told. No, it's not. No, this is media feeding us a lie. This is men feeding us a lie. I mean, granted, the Wuthering latest version is by a whole host of women, but we're glorifying bad behavior from men. And don't get me wrong, Kathy is also Catherine and Kathy, actually. They're all bad people.
Yeah.
They just are. But we absolve many of them, most of them, of their wrongdoing.
Let me do a horrible comparison. And actually, I'm annoyed with this comparison. You can help me find another one, because I'm not comparing it because he's a black man, but I was thinking of O.J. Simpson and his ex-wife. I'm just trying to find like a scenario of someone who is very obviously horrible. And I'm just like, I didn't mean to go straight to the black man. Okay, I'm trying to think of another horrible white man.
Horrible. That we glorify?
No, just like in the 90s, there was an actor, a white actor, who beat his girlfriend, famously.
You could go Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
You know what?
That's an excellent example.
Is a great fucking example. The way that people were defending Johnny Depp, people were like, well, Amber wasn't great either. And it's like, that doesn't absolve him.
Right. Just because she's problematic, she was. She also, she fought back, right? But his whole court case was, everything you said about me is correct, but you said it.
Yes, he chose a state that helps specifically with defamation that neither of them have ever lived in.
Yeah.
That shows what he went in there with the plan on winning it. It was more about of a defamation case than it was about did it happen or not.
Right. And I think people don't get that nuance.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're both wrong.
Yes.
They're both shitty.
Another wonderful example of like, this is such a good example. But I mean, they're both shitty. And it's just the way that Kathy and Heathcliff are both shitty. One is just a little bit more shitty than the other, who took it too far. And that was Johnny Depp. And like, God, people were so intense for defending him.
And it's a great parallel to Heathcliff.
Yeah. And then the second that Johnny Depp won his court case, everyone felt like, oh, see, it proved his innocence.
No.
It's like, it literally does not. It literally does not prove his innocence. And it's just moments like that where we as a society continue to romanticize Johnny Depp, to continue to let him play things out. And I was, trying to think of like horrible men in history where they romanticize them. Look at Trump. He's a horrible man that certain people romanticize. Like, it's just this idea, when we don't hold the man accountable, the lore is then romanticized.
I think that's an excellent point. Quite frankly, it's in some ways, and this is maybe a little less harsh and a little less direct, but it's kind of the same way we romanticize Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
We're romanticizing teenagers loving each other and killing themselves for it.
Romeo might have been in his early 20s.
Right.
Juliet was 13. And that's another one side note before we need to move on to the next segment. People like to pull up Romeo and Juliet as an example of like, see, they got married young back in the day. No, they didn't. That's actually a horrible, like, even if they got married, they weren't supposed to have sex until like years later, because there was a really famous case of this child queen who got married and had a baby at 13. She almost died from pregnancy and was never able to conceive again. And it was like so horrific that everyone was like, oh no. And people go, oh, well, the second you were 25, you're a spinster. And it's like, not necessarily. Like, people still waited until like early 20s to have kids. So that's another moment of like Romeo and Juliet where people romanticize it. And it's like, actually, everything about Romeo is supposed to set you up to be like, he's kind of a dick. He ditches Rosalind, falls in love with a child, and then
manipulates her.
And it was like, let's go get married.
Right. And then she kills herself.
Yeah.
For him. And then he wakes up because he didn't communicate. And then he had to...
That makes me feel good. In the sense that no one here is arguing us. It's just the two of us hyping each other out. So, I mean, actually, we had one listener, Misty, who says it, honestly, she sums it up nicely. Because as we're about to go into Kathy, going into the next segment discussing Kathy, and Misty says, I love it, but they're both cunts. I don't remember feeling that way reading it. Reread time. So that was Misty's take on the Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie. It's funny because I feel like they're more cunty in the book. Like, they're more horrible in the book. The movie was so gentle with them.
Yep. I mean, the movie was very forgiving of Heathcliff, which we talked about in last week's episode.
Less forgiving of Catherine.
But did a good job conveying her complexity, which is kind of dumbed down in past versions of Wuthering Heights adaptations.
I'm so annoyed because it's like, wow, you give us a more complex Kathy, but a more complex Kathy equals a more salty, a more complicated, a non-moral, like a morally gray character. But then you made Heathcliff better. So it's like, so you portrayed the shittiness of this female character better, and then you got rid of the shittiness of the male character.
Yep.
Do you see where it's like, you brought one up, you brought one down, but like down is where she is.
Right.
And again, it's hard because that's where it's like, I liked this movie a lot. It will never succeed as Wuthering Heights because because of things like this,
Yeah,
you know?
agreed.
So, Catherine, our girl, victim, agent, or catalyst. Let's talk about her being trapped in society.
So, trapped by society. Funny how no one calls that out.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think it's very well done in most of the movies either,
Yeah.
right? She seems flighty. She seems to be not as devoted as Heathcliff is to her. And she seems like a gold digger in most cases, quite frankly. And maybe the subtext is meant to be there, but I don't think it's done very well, except in the 2026 version of Wuthering Heights. And I even say it's lost a little bit in the book itself.
Yeah.
Because the story's being told from Nellie Dean's perspective, and Nellie Dean is biased, right? Nellie Dean intentionally makes Catherine look as bad as possible. So, if you're not doing the analysis, you do assume these things about Kathy. I'm very disappointed in the screenwriters of the older plays of the older movies, because did you not study the book?
I know. It is something where, like, I feel like so many of the past movies were just like, and then she got a makeover. And then she came home in a shiny dress. And to your point, the 2026 Margot Robbie, her portrayal and how they depicted Catherine as being a doll and as, like, you know, moving into a room that is made out of her skin or looks like it's made out of her skin. I think that they did a great way of showing that she is trapped, that this is not her, that it's comfortable, but, you know, like, she's very much trapped here. That's part of her complexity as a character.
Right. And they did a lot of good setup because they chose to combine Hindley and Father Earnshaw's characters.
Yeah.
And so they made Mr. Earnshaw very despicable as a father figure.
Yep.
She's literally freezing, can't light fires because they have no money for firewood. She does it to save herself, right? She marries Edgar to save herself and her family from being destitute.
Yeah.
But is that actually living a life by selling yourself over to the highest bidder?
And the fact that they played that up was a good, more in your face, because in the book, it's not so aggressive, right? You know, they want to advance themselves, but they're not destitute necessarily. I mean, eventually Hindley goes and sells off his property.
Right.
But it's more of like, it is an advancement. I totally forgot about that fire scene and that Heathcliff like smashes a chair in. I had two immediate thoughts. The first one, damn, that's hot. The second one is, great, so no one can sit. Like, what are you going to do when Kathy is like, I wish I had a chair? Is he going to go and get a boulder and smash that in so that she can sit on it?
Yeah, my last thought was, that was the last nice chair around the table.
I know.
You could have sold it.
Well, it's like there were other more falling apart things in the house that could have burned.
Yeah.
It was hot, but it was also showing his limited thinking abilities. So Catherine is, as a reminder, she's emotionally destructive. And I love the framing of this, of shifting it to saying she's destructive. And that's like a trait that I feel like many people can see even today, that you're going against your own good. You're dating a guy and he's really nice and you start running away and your therapist goes, are you being destructive right now?
Yeah. Are you
Like,
self-sabotaging?
Yeah, exactly. And Catherine is very much a self-sabotaging character. Another one that people don't always capture, but I'm hoping that through this, everyone kind of sees that a little bit more and maybe even sees themselves in Catherine with that.
Yeah, I think it also begs the question, and this is where I think every movie interpretation or adaptation is a little different.
Yeah.
To what extent does Catherine use her emotional destructiveness to trap Heathcliff as much as she feels trapped by society?
Yep.
And I think each adaptation that we've seen does it differently. If I think about the book, it certainly seems like, I don't know that Nellie Dean necessarily paints Catherine as malicious, but I do think she paints Catherine as uncaring.
Yeah.
And the destruction, the implosion of her emotions is self-induced because of that carelessness. Whereas if you look at the Laurence Olivier version from 1939, love how we call it by the man.
Yeah.
I don't know the actress's name.
No.
She was very pretty, though. In that version, Catherine is very spiteful, very malicious. Like, she marries Edgar out of spite, not because it's for the betterment of her family.
Yep.
In some ways, I was in high school. I interpreted Catherine's treatment of Isabella and mocking Isabella for her feelings towards Heathcliff as malicious, as intentionally not only putting Isabella down, but antagonizing Heathcliff to see if he would declare his love for Catherine rather than the opposite of what he does, which is go and illicitly marry Isabella and trap her.
Yep.
But I do think every movie interpretation that we watched paints it as Catherine genuinely warning Isabella away from Heathcliff and being like, he's shitty.
Yeah.
Like, stop romanticizing him.
Except for the Margot Robbie version. And I love that because it is a combination, right? Like, it's her being concerned and her being jealous. Like, you know, there is certainly jealousy there, but it's also like, no, he's not good. Like, you are way too weak to be with a man like him. Like, he would eat you up. And I felt like the modern version did a great job of capturing both elements of it.
I think what it did well is show just how aligned Heathcliff and Catherine are in their enjoyment of making others feel bad.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've spent their lives talking shit about the Lintons. And now that Catherine is married to the Linton family, she can't necessarily do that to Isabella. So using Heathcliff as an scapegoat to do that shows just how bad she is in comparison to Heathcliff in some ways.
It's so true. Shall we get into segment 4?
Actually, one of our listeners said something about Kathy.
Oh, okay.
Jade said, book was grim, violent, and racist, but good to see unpleasant women represented in a book for the era.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point. Catherine isn't pleasant, and it's not like anybody glorifies her because nobody's capable of glorifying an unpleasant woman.
Yeah.
In media, at least. However, I think it was very, very brave of Emily Bronte to write about an FMC who is unpleasant.
Yeah. I mean, this listener's comment is kind of spot on because, like, can you repeat, like, they didn't like the book wasn't enjoyable or something?
The book was grim, violent, and racist.
Yeah. You nailed it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
I mean, you're right. They didn't say that they didn't enjoy it, but it is grim, violent, and racist. And that's what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. Now, I think a lot of responses that we received from our listeners really falls into this next category of emotional experience versus intellectual reading. And there are a lot of listeners who respond emotionally to this.
Yep.
And I don't blame them. It is interesting to see the spectrum of emotional responses to Wuthering Heights.
I wish one of the things I asked was like, why is this your favorite? Because someone says, this is one of my favorite books. I revisit it often. I thought the movie was a fun interpretation. Like, why is it your favorite? And there's no wrong answer to it. I love Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom sucks. The Phantom tried to kidnap her. The Phantom was like taking her underground, killed people. Like, every argument we have about Heathcliff, I could say about the Phantom. Yeah. However, every time I want them to get together. Like,
I do too. I do too. Fuck Raoul.
Fuck Raoul. When I say like, oh, tell me why you loved it. If you loved it because you're like, oh, I just wish they would get together. It's like, I get that with Phantom of the Opera. Who am I to judge?
Yeah. One listener, Sora, one of the worst, most miserable books I've ever read.
Another person says, I actually hate the book and think it's overhyped.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. That was my feeling in high school. And that's why when Jack was like, we got to do this, I was like, okay, I know why we're doing it, but I really don't like this book.
Did you feel like you liked it more after this?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think the cultural significance is really important to understand and appreciate what's happening here.
Yeah.
I also appreciate the moral ambiguity of everybody.
Yeah.
As an adult, better able to understand what that's supposed to mean, which I don't think I was able to grasp at 16.
I think this is one of those age and distance. And I wonder if there are better classics to show the youth. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of those books that so many young women and men, I'm sure, read it, romanticized it, and kept that version of the romanticized book in their head.
Yeah.
When it's so hard to get 16-year-olds to understand, like, hey,
Yeah.
it's actually about abuse and,
Yeah.
saying I am Heathcliff isn't romantic.
Right. Brogan says the same thing. The toxic obsession in the book should not be romanticized as a love story.
Yeah. And that's where, it just keeps coming back down to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone looks at this and sees it as a romantic love story, then, I get it. I would argue that Phantom of the Opera is meant to be viewed as a tragic because she does choose Raoul in the end. And it is kind of like a wistful goodbye to the Phantom, but it is like an actual happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
So, but versus this one, it's like you're not meant to feel good.
Right. I think Phantom of the Opera is supposed to be like the follies of youth.
Yeah.
And experience teaches you to choose better in the future, where Wuthering Heights does well and why it's studied so much is all the symbolism.
Yeah.
And because of its gothic nature. And we do have a few listeners who pointed out, like, the symbolism of Chef's Kiss, the cinematography of the movies is amazing. And that's intentional because it's so integral to the storytelling.
Yeah. Someone wrote, loved both, but calling the movie an adaptation of Wuthering Heights is the same as calling The Lion King an adaptation of Hamlet. That's great.
That's so true.
Yeah. I don't think they marketed it as Hamlet. They didn't go around and be like, it's Hamlet for children.
No, they didn't. I don't think anyone would allow their child to watch Hamlet for children.
I feel like this movie, and it wouldn't have gotten made, but I feel like it would have been better off having been like Lion King, Clueless, like something. It doesn't even have to be modern, but just something like completely different that you can then go, wait, is this Wuthering Heights? And you go, yeah, it was inspired by it. But it never would have been made if it wasn't called Wuthering Heights, right?
Right.
Like, that's part of the name that draws people.
Right. It is interesting how we have some responses where, okay, the movie inspired me to read the book.
Yeah.
Because I've never read the book or I don't remember the book. And then we have one response from Melissa that says, the first quarter of the book was confusing.
Yeah.
And structurally, it can be very confusing if you don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah, so let's get into the we'll call it the intellectual side of reading, where you think about the structure of like the quarter. Yeah, so that's the same, Melissa. The quarter of the book was confusing with POVs, and then someone else says in a DM, they wrote, favorite book, CB is an absolute genius. Is that the director?
I think it's Chloe Gong.
I mean, were they thinking Emily Bronte and they wrote Charlotte Bronte?
Oh, maybe.
They continue, I've always considered Nellie Dean a villain. Well, not a villain, but definitely not innocent. She's a fully active participant in the madness. I feel like in her narration, she kind of pretends like she's innocent, like she's an innocent bystander to all these crazy neighborhood shenanigans. I like that the film shows her in action as part of what leads to Catherine's death. In the book, what really cements Nellie as a villain for me is when young Kathy is basically kidnapped by Heathcliff and forced to marry Linton, and Nellie Dean is just like, shrug emoji? Like, someone call the police. She is so messy. They're all messy. Whoever played Isabella crushed it. She was my favorite part of the movie. Yeah, this movie did a fantastic job.
I loved the movie for many reasons.
Yeah.
Because it's an interpretation. But if you're looking for an accurate portrayal of the book, that is not what you want to go watch.
No.
Right? That movie is not an accurate portrayal of the characters or the story. And Lindsay says it pretty well. This is one of my favorite books. I revisit it often. I thought the movie was a fun interpretation, but ultimately lacked what so many love about the book: the haunting, the misery, and the unending longing.
Yeah, I'm going through DMs that I missed where I'm like, oh, people did answer some of these questions. So here's another DM. And I don't want to diminish people's experience or thoughts with the book. They wrote, the book is equally a love story as much as it is a revenge story. The second half of the book is just as important as the first. The movie, while visually stunning, should not be called Wuthering Heights. Make a new movie. Yeah, I'm saying yes to call it a new movie. The idea that it's the same, that it's equal parts, I even see, like, with us saying it, I don't want to say that because literature is all interpretation. Even in high school, you're never going to get the same teacher, like different teachers giving the same interpretation.
Right.
I think if you wanted to make a case that they're actually in love and that this is a love story as much as it is an obsession story, I think that's fair. I think you can. Yeah. I don't want to say that there's no love, but when it's that much obsession, it corrupts what could be love.
Yeah, and I can make a case, especially with the movie adaptation. The movie adaptation presents it as Catherine and Heathcliff loved each other. It just needed time for it to be revealed. What destroys their relationship are the rich people who move into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right? Because that rearranges Catherine's focus to being obsessed with, well, what they have, what we don't have. I want what they have, etc. And so in a lot of ways, the introduction of Edgar and Isabella and all of their wealth is the catalyst for the end of their relationship. And so maybe prior to that, they were truly in love. They were just young.
Yeah.
And then it was spoiled by what the Lintons represent, which is true society. And that maybe if those two had not been tainted by civil society, they could have remained healthy and untouched.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it then brings the question, is young love true love?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say that and have listeners who are with their college or high school sweethearts being like, of course it's true love. Any person I've talked to who's been with their partner for a very long time from when they were very young, I feel like everything that I've heard is that you fall in love almost again in your 20s. Like, it's not the same love as when you're in your, teens. And you can look at them and be like, I love him as much as the day we were 16, but like you grow, right? You have to grow. And then it comes down to like, is young love true love when you're without the growth and being faced with the challenge of growth? Because Heathcliff only went and quote unquote bettered himself, like became wealthy because Kathy chose someone else. Because Kathy said, I can't, he's poor, I can't do that. It would degrade me to be with Heathcliff.
Right. So he proved her wrong.
Yeah, he wouldn't have done that without that.
Right.
I think part of the appeared tragedy is, oh, if only she had waited, they could be together. But it's like, that's the appeared tragedy. If she had chosen Heathcliff, would they still be on that farm waiting for her brother to die and hope for the best? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that their life would have been good. It just their love might have been shifted, right? Like, it might have turned into something even more toxic with time and not having basic needs covered and met. Just pointing that out. All right, this one is from DJ. I just finished reading Wuthering Heights for my book club and I really enjoyed it. I haven't read a classic in a few years, so it was a little hard to get back into the style of it, but the story was super interesting and I read it in about 3 sittings. Let's talk about the writing, because we haven't done that enough. We actually haven't talked about the writing as I pull down my Wuthering Heights copy. Look at this beautiful copy.
Beautiful.
Wuthering Heights. Gold edges. It's very complicated. Because like it keeps to the Yorkshire accent in the book.
Yeah. Anytime Joseph speaks, I honestly can't fucking understand it because it's written with an accent. So it's not written in, proper spelling. And you have to kind of sound it out to see if you can even understand it.
Yeah. This is Hindley, not, he shall have his share of my hand if I catch him downstairs till dark, cried Hindley. Begone, you vagabond. The writing is complicated, far more complicated, I would say, than Pride and Prejudice.
Absolutely. Pride and Prejudice is very conversational.
Yeah, here we go. I found some Joseph. Is there nobody inside to open the door? I hallooed responsively. There's none but 'tis Mrs. and she'll not open't, and I mark year flesome dins till nich.
I don't know what the second half of that meant.
Nor me, I'll hae no hend, wit muttered, the head vanishing.
Which, Joseph, we haven't really talked about Joseph and how Joseph is also emblematic of the Moors and the wildness of the Moors and the lack of society and how he tries to better himself through his religiosity.
Oh, I have a different interpretation.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like Joseph very obviously represents religion, and to me, I took him as there is no God here. Because he is religion. He's so not religious, right? Like everything he says, everything he tries to talk about, it's like, this ain't the Bible here.
Right.
There is the only one who talks about religion is Joseph. No one else here is very religious.
Yeah.
And if he is our moral compass, if that is our direction to God and holy and what is good
and morality,
then this world is fucked.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because his piousness is false piousness. It's uninformed. It's biased, just like everything else in this novel.
I'm surprised he lives as long as he does.
Honestly.
He keeps going, and You know, maybe he's doing something right. All right. I think that's all the comments of DMs that I hopefully, didn't miss. Okay.
We have one more comment that I think is worth bringing up. And we talked about it a little bit last week, but I think it's worth talking about here in response to the movies. All of them, including the 2026. Ariel says, please talk about the POC erasure, because there's a lot of POC erasure in all the film adaptations.
Yeah, it annoys me for so many reasons, but like that's one of the first things that people on Book Talk were saying. And that was one of the first things people in the comments were like, just let it be.
Yeah.
Jacob Elordi's hot. And it's like,
there's lots of hot men of color as well. And if you don't think that, maybe you need to check yourself.
Michael B. Jordan, whatever he wants, he gets. Like, whatever
Have we watched Sinners? Have you not watched Sinners?
Honestly, I feel like they should have made him triplets just so to have more of Michael B. Jordan. The scene of Michael B. Jordan fighting Michael B. Jordan did something to me biblically. I don't know what it is, but having them both fight for my love was such a weird moment where I was like, how are you guys coming into me, my love for you? Yeah, like obviously Theo James is like my number one, but the way that I'm feral for Michael B. Jordan is like a close second.
I think one of the complicated things, and I debated with myself a lot when I was in the movie theater watching Wuthering Heights, the newest release in the movie theater, I debated a lot with myself about why Edgar Linton and Nellie Dean are the two persons of color and everybody else is white. Because in the book, to the best of our knowledge, Heathcliff is the person of color. And in a world where people care about diversity, was a decision made, maybe inappropriately, in my opinion, since this is so much about race, to not allow the villain character, not that Heathcliff is a villain in this, but not allow the villain character to be a person of color. But on the flip side, Edgar and Nellie are painted out to be villains in their own right.
That's what's so fucked is like you finally have, not finally, but like this is the most saving of Heathcliff movie variation that we have seen, right? Like at every given turn that is bad about Heathcliff, they fix him, right?
Right.
And here you go, you have the most honorable of all the Heathcliffs that you've gotten, and you decide to make him white, and you decide to villainize the people of color. And it is like, this is the one time that if you don't want to villainize the person of color, you make him Heathcliff. Yeah.
Right. It's true. And I do wonder if it was a casting choice because people would potentially be less likely to forgive Heathcliff and therefore less likely to watch the movie if Heathcliff was a person of color.
I mean, she flat out, whoever was the person who casted
Emerald.
Yeah. Said, I wanted Jacob Elordi. Like this was made for Jacob Elordi. And there are some times, and I feel like a lot of books do this, where they just make a character a person of color because they're hitting a quota. Sometimes I don't notice it, and that's the best time because everyone just feels naturally who they are. You know what I mean? And then there's other times where it's like, oh, so this is like the one friend who is the one person of color. And it's never felt like this is a movie that I was hyper aware of, like they were just hitting check marks to me. They needed that diversity check mark, so they're going to do it.
Yep.
Like these are the two you get.
Yep. You got one male, one female. Done.
Yep. We don't need to think about it anymore.
Yep.
That's fine.
Yep.
Even like depraved Joseph, like who wasn't even depraved. He was just kind of kinky and not even fully.
Yeah.
Like they really just said, what's the bare minimum we can do for diversity while removing the one bit of poignant diversity for this book.
Right. You can't take a book about race and remove race. From the equation.
Yeah. It's so important for the time that it was written.
Yeah.
It's important because what I feel like the book did is when I read Wuthering Heights, I don't walk away saying, wow, they're villainizing the one black person in this book.
Right.
Maybe they're not person of color, right? They're villainizing the one person of color. Heathcliff was made into the monster he becomes because of the white people around him. And that's hard to do too, right? Like you have a villainous POC who is, but like his villainous was created by white white people. So I feel like what you're saying, someone, they might think it's risky, or it's like an easy, like, even if it's not risky, like an easy racist out. And it didn't feel like an easy racist out. When I read the book, I don't look at it and say, Emily Bronte is just trying to make the one person of color villainous because in the time period, they felt like anyone who was not white was villainous.
Right.
I didn't feel that at all.
I don't either.
I felt it was very much Heathcliff was an innocent boy who was brought in and turned into the monster because of Henley, because of Catherine, because of the situation and the constant racism, and Nellie Dean calling him it for the first bit of his life. Like, Heathcliff was an innocent and then was created.
Yeah.
Everything he does is to get revenge on the people that made him feel horrible.
Right. And made him
and abused him.
Right. Exactly. In some ways, I mean, irony that Jacob Elordi was also Frankenstein's monster, but in a lot of ways, it's like Frankenstein's monster, right?
Yeah.
Society perceives the monster as a monster, but he's like, but you created me. Yeah. I am your creation. And Frankenstein hates the monster.
Yeah.
So it's not unsimilar.
No, not at all. And that's why when you have conversations of, is this a love story? Is this adaptation accurate? The answer is almost going to be no, because there's just so many other things. And again, it's just an anticlimactic story. You know what I found interesting about the Margot Robbie version is the fact that I was surprised that there wasn't going to be Gen 2 when they made a point that Isabella was not Edgar's sister.
Yeah.
I thought they were setting it up for Gen 2 because that way, like, the cousins can all get married because they're not related to each other.
Right.
And then that was not it.
Right. Well, and they didn't even have Henley, so there's never going to be a Hareton character.
Which is why I thought, like, it was just going to be their kids getting together.
Like, to simplify it. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought they were, like, going to remove one cousin and then make the other ones not cousins and be like, there was never incesty things here.
Right. I think one of the things we have to understand about the adaptations of this book is that, and this is true of readers too, it's easy to misinterpret Wuthering Heights because no one's comfortable with it as it truly is, right? It is morally ambiguous. Each character has moral failings.
Yeah.
And if you can't reconcile that and appreciate it for what it is, every adaptation is going to be different and wrong, quite frankly.
And I've gotten into this conversation before with people of like, well, it's an adaptation. They can do what they want. Yeah, you absolutely can. But now the adaptation is the cultural association is what people think of.
Right.
The amount of people who have not read this book, who watched the movie, this is now what they think that Wuthering Heights is.
Right. And that's why the interpretation of Wuthering Heights is consistently wrong, is because I watched, the 1939 version because my parents watched it, or I watched the 1992 or the 1970. Like, they're all wrong.
Yeah.
But if we perpetuate the wrong narrative, it becomes the common understanding.
It's no longer a conversation about the erasure of a POC character, but as well the erasure of these heavy topics that was masterfully written by a woman that we are now simplifying and removing the complexity that this female author who is ahead of her time, who had to, against everything working against her, who died young.
Yeah.
We are stripping her legacy. If anyone reads ACOTAR or anything along those lines, SJM talked about in her Call Her Daddy interview legacy. And I think that's fair for authors to talk about their legacy. And when you have an author like Jane Austen, her legacy lives on and, is so celebrated. And I feel like when you have a book like Wuthering Heights and every single adaptation, every single time people like just kind of glaze over it and miss it, you're diminishing the legacy of a young woman who wrote a book that was ahead of her time and was like meant to be a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, what society has done has taken Wuthering Heights and has tried to fit it into the boxes of Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
However, it's more accurately Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But they don't
ironically.
allow it. Ironically, and that's classified as a horror, even though there are elements of love. But because people are not comfortable with this idea of people in love creating a toxic environment, it doesn't fit in the category of horror for them. It must be romance.
Yep. So that's that segment. Yeah. So that kind of combined our last segment, guys, where it goes into the moral ambiguity, which invites multiple readings. I'm really happy that we did this in the analysis, and that's like what Academia Unlocked is all about, right? Where I haven't read this in forever. I haven't thought about this book critically in forever.
Mhm.
Certainly not with my adult brain.
Right.
And by doing that, I'm able to have a different understanding, a different interpretation. And when it comes to works like these, in whatever 10, 20 years, I can reread this again and we'll have a different understanding and feeling about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I highly recommend reading it as an adult because I think, I read this 20 years ago once. And at the age of 16, you don't understand the complexity of being in love and losing identity or finding identity. You don't understand the complexity of toxic relationships. Like everything is very two-dimensional. And so to be an adult reading this, you can see the other dimensions Bronte is operating on and this story is operating on. And it really does make you examine what is love and what is healthy love.
Yep.
And this is not it.
Yep. And I really hope that through these 4 parts, if there's anything that's clear, it's the fact that, we talk about in very decisive terms and words, but at the same time, hopefully you heard the well, it could be this, it could be that. Weird times that I was defending Kathy, and other times it's oh, she's straight up manipulative and abusive. It exposes how we interpret intensity, love, and identity. Literature isn't about giving answers.
Right.
It's not an easy thing. Even when there are clear answers, like this book is about abuse, it's complicated.
Right.
There's layers, and that is academia.
And that's why people read it differently. Just like Jack has a different interpretation of Joseph's role versus me.
Yep.
And all are acceptable.
Absolutely. I hope you guys liked it. This was our very first book for Academia Unlocked. Amy and I liked it, so hopefully you guys did too.
Yeah, and if you give us feedback, we won't be able to incorporate it for several series.
Yeah, so don't get mad at us yet. But please give us feedback, because in that way we can incorporate it for down the road.
Yeah, and just make a better series.
Absolutely. Next book will be Pride and Prejudice. After that will be The Color Purple. We'll put it in the show notes what books are coming up. After The Color Purple is Twilight, then The Joylet Club.
I think you can stop there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll stop there. So you guys can get ahead of the reading.
Yes.
Yeah, let's sign off.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Academia Unlocked by Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy. Next week, we begin our 4-part discussion of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen.
If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps other readers find us. And of course, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode. Share your comments through our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com, and we might feature your feedback in a future mini episode or in a Patreon exclusive episode.
For merch and more ways to support the show, head to booktalkforbooktalk.com. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. And don't forget to join us by subscribing to the subtextsocietyjournal.substack.com to get more insights into the romantasy and romance genres.
Bye.
Bye.